In the sewing world, one question never goes away. Why is my fit still wrong? Or why do principles I've been taught seem to work until I hit a unique shape? This isn't just your struggle, it's a universal frustration every sewist faces sooner or later. Nights lost in the studio, fabric wasted, confidence is shaken, and still the fit is off. And here is the kicker. We hear the same frustration from thousands of sewists around the world. People who just want to be creative, not stuck as a full-time fit solver. And this is exactly the point where most sewists go wrong. They think fit problems call for more fixing, when in reality they require a completely different starting point. Today we're going to unpack that starting point. And I'm here with Nancy Tauber, the pattern-making authority fashion houses call when fit problems can't be solved with templates, charts or guesswork. Nancy, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's lovely to be here.
I've been waiting for this one because what we're about to uncover is the exact thing no one tells sewists. Why fit really fails and why it's not your fault.
So the problem what a lot of sewists do is they kind of work backwards. Our rib cage goes up and down. We need to be able to breathe.
Yeah.
We need to live in these clothes.
By the end of this, you will know why commercial patterns don't fit real women's bodies.
It doesn't tell you where the hip is compared to the waist. It doesn't tell you where the bust point is compared to the waist. It's like building a house, and if you've got the foundation wrong, anything you put on top of that is just going to fall down.
The myths that body shapes that keep sewists stuck.
You know, they can have a really tiny waist and quite large hips. And sometimes, I get students send me patterns where, you don't want that outer edge looking on your pattern looking like this. So they end up starting with a commercial pattern, which is a great starting point. And that is until you hit these unique body shapes.
And the one foundation that lets draft garments fit anybody without endless alterations, without the guesswork.
People think they need a special hack for every unique body shape. And this is the connection a lot of people miss. But yeah, 8 toiles, and nowadays I mostly don't make a toile.
If you've ever thought, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my sewing, maybe I'm not good enough, this episode will flip that belief on its head, and by the time we're done, you'll see exactly why fit has failed you in the past and the one shift that makes it finally work.
The moment you start drafting from the body, instead of trying to adjust a template, fit no longer becomes something you try to chase. It's something you control. You only get to be successful by failure. Failure is the route to success.
Okay, Nancy, confession time.
Yep.
Sometimes I swear patterns are gaslighting us. You follow every instruction, the garment still looks like a sack of potatoes. Tell me I'm not crazy here. Why does this actually happen? And what's actually wild is the principles seem to work until you hit a unique body. And that's when everything just falls apart.
Yeah, exactly, because everyone is unique. So the problem what a lot of sewists do is they kind of work backwards. What they'll do is, especially with commercial patterns, you don't have all that information. You've only got limited information on there. So they go, okay, I'll do a bust of that size and a waist of that size. But half the information is missing. But what they'll do is they'll make it up. They might make a toile, or they might even make it in their real fabric. And then they'll fix the problems after that. So the problem with that is by doing it that way, the toile or the garment, what it does, it just reveals all the problems that you've done. So instead of wasting all that time, because sometimes you can't actually fix that problem, is to go back to the basics of pattern cutting know-how. So it's the basis of pattern cutting to know where you need to put those measurements in, where you need to mark those patterns. Because using all the width measurements of the bust, the waist and the hip is just part of the story. The other measurements are what I call the length measurements, which is just as important. So, for example, the armhole. If you don't have that armhole depth right, then if your armhole is too low, then you can't actually lift your arm up. It will be down here. So you don't have excess movement of the sleeve there. Yeah. If it's too tight, that's going to hurt. We all had that time where we've tried something on, it's like, this is a bit too small. Same with the back width. So if you don't have these certain measurements in, you can't get a good armhole. The waist sits in the wrong place. Right. Yes, you can shorten and lengthen them, but it's not allowing for where the shoulders are, the length measurements. So you're starting at a wrong point. So this is the issue. If you're starting with something that's already flawed and then you're just trying to fix it, it's like just putting a plaster over the top, which is like a gaping wound underneath. You need to address the gaping wound underneath.
First.
It just end up in this endless loop of this like alteration nightmare. And this is especially with people with unique shapes, like long torso or fuller hips compared to the small waist. So they end up starting with a commercial pattern, which is a great starting point. And that is until you hit these unique body shapes. So learning pattern making just helps to fix all those problems from the foundation. So you don't face these problems. Instead of making something and fixing the problems afterwards, you fix the problems before you even make the pattern. On the pattern, that's where you fix the problems, and then you can go forward. And then it just gives you so much more confidence to move on. Because when you're in that endless loop of alterations, you just end up blaming yourself, like, I can't do this. Because unfortunately, the right pattern making system isn't easily available. So they just blame themselves unnecessarily.
And that's so heartbreaking, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
it's so sad that they waste so much time and energy into these things and then end up just throwing them away and blaming themselves.
And we've all been there as well.
Yeah,
And
it's
just
so
heartbreaking.
sad. And let's be honest, we've all had that moment where you're ready to throw the twirls across the room. And honestly, I've got a whole graveyard of twirls in my closet.
We
so
all do. We
may
all
they
do.
rest in peace. Nancy, did you ever have a moment in your earlier career? Like, did you ever feel like that? Where you were like, oh,
Oh, God, yes. So I think I just graduated and it was my first custom job, so bespoke. And I think it was like a friend of my mum, and it was bridal.
ooh, pressure.
Yeah, it wasn't the bride, it was the bridesmaid, but still, for your first project, don't go into bridal, it's
Yeah.
terrifying. So 2 unique bodies and 2 different designs as well. And I think I made 8 toiles each of each dress
Wow.
to get the right fit. But I did get there in the end. And again, it was just the beginning of my career. And I never forget, because this fabric had no give. And I said to them, whatever you do, please don't put on any weight. We don't have any space
Please.
for that. Please don't put on any weight. And they went away and they went on the adductor machine at the gym.
Oh,
Yeah, I think they look great, but they just didn't fit the dresses. Yeah, they put on an inch around their hips, both of them. And I just ended up crying. And
I bet.
yeah. So, and this is a good this is a really good learning curve for me, was I always have extra fabric, because I was able to cut the dresses anyway and add a panel in.
Yeah.
Like just put in a little waist seam. So one of them just had a tiny waist seam because I was able to add through there. And the other one was a wrap dress. I was able to hide it all underneath. Always buy an extra bit of fabric. So,
yeah, that's a good message.
but yeah, 8 toiles. And nowadays I mostly don't make a toile unless I really, really have to. But it's very rare that I even make a toile nowadays. But just so you know, all of you out there, if you're making lots of toiles now, there'll be days when you don't make any toiles. But yeah, but get the pattern right. Now I know how to do it properly.
Honestly, it's such a good message for everyone, especially if you're just starting out. Even if you're experienced and you're just not quite at that point yet,
Exactly.
you'll get there eventually. And
Exactly.
it's just experience, and you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and having the right tools and the right information of where you're going wrong as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to pause here and talk about commercial patterns, because this is one of the biggest misconceptions in sewing, and honestly the root cause of most fit issues, especially when it comes to unique bodies, plus size, petites, anyone outside of the average mannequin.
Yeah.
That's where the whole system really starts to break down. On the surface, working with a template sounds like really great, right?
Yeah.
But here's the problem. They're built for mannequins, standardized and averaged out.
Yeah.
Stripped down for mass production like it's a one-size-fits-all sort of rule. Sure, you can squeeze your feet into shoes that don't fit, but you can't really run a marathon in shoes that don't fit, right?
Exactly. Because the one size fit all. Because why do people use commercial patterns? Is to make something for themselves. And it might be because nothing fits them on the high street. So it's still the same issues that you have with buying clothes. It's a standard size. And the thing is, as a starting point, commercial patterns are great. It's a really good way of getting into looking what patterns look like. You have
Right.
the notches, you have all the grain lines, the sewing instructions are all there. They're really great. But the measurements that they give you, it's very limited information.
Yeah.
So your measurement chart is like this. measurement charts should be like this.
Yeah.
So they'll give you a measurement, like they'll give you the bust measurement, the waist, the hip, maybe even a back length. They won't tell you where the bust point is. And you can shorten and lengthen them, but it only gives you certain points where you
Yeah,
can
you're
shorten and
limited.
lengthen them. You're
Yeah.
limited. So, and the one thing that annoys me is when it grades up. So say if someone is a size, like say 20, but so if they're size 20, they're supposed to have really broad shoulders as well, because it's the way it's graded up.
Yeah.
And it's the way it works on the high street as well. So like I said, they're built for that standard measurement, not for unique bodies. And yes, you can have like, okay, I'll cut the bust to this, but the waist is this and the hips to this.
Of course.
But it doesn't give you the information of where the underarm is, doesn't give you a neck measurement, doesn't give you a shoulder measurement, doesn't give you where the high hip is, doesn't tell you where the hip is compared to the waist, doesn't tell you where the bust point is compared to the waist. So the waist might be in the wrong place, the bust point might be in the wrong place. So
Yeah.
you're starting with something that's going to be wrong to start with. It's like building a house, and if you've got the foundation wrong, anything you put on top of that
Yeah.
is just going to fall down. So get the foundation right,
Right.
and then it can be better.
It's almost like you haven't got enough initial information. The more information that you have first,
Exactly.
the better it'll become.
And then the other thing they do, so they're all good because they already have seam allowances in them. They're not marked. It does tell you how much. And they also don't tell you what ease is. Now, ease is something you need in every, what we call woven garment. So it's a non-stretch garment.
Right.
And so you need ease that's around the bust or around the waist, and around the bust you need the most. And the reason why, our rib cage goes up and down. We need to be able
of
to
course,
breathe.
yeah.
We need to live
Yeah.
in these clothes. So it's not going to be to a body measurement. But commercial patterns don't tell you how much that they
Right.
put in. So imagine you're trying to work it out. And so you've got
Yeah.
6 panels, that's 12 seams with all the seam allowances. You've got to measure each one, minus all that, times 1.5, which is a seam allowance, times by 12.
That's a lot of math.
I mean, I'm getting exhausted just thinking about
Yeah.
that. And then as a beginner, you're like, well, but where is the bust point? And how much ease do I have there? Because how much ease we have on the bust is different to how much ease we have on the waist, compared to how much ease we have up here on the back width. It's all slightly different to allow for movement. So they're great because they actually have that in, but they're not telling you how much
Yeah.
and where.
It's a very, very basic standard.
Yeah, so it's good for a beginner. It's good to get started.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, they just need more information. The more information in the beginning, it just seems to become easier as you kind of go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like was it like recipes? If you have a standard recipe where it doesn't tell you it's like having a
Yeah.
recipe and it's just, you just got the ingredients and choose 4 ingredients out of 12 and no cooking instructions or anything like that. And you just
do what you think.
yeah.
Yeah. Hope for the best.
Your kitchen will be on fire.
Yeah.
Well, mine would anyway.
Or a rubbish cake. So the truth actually is that it's not really bad sewing. It's just a really broken system.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not really designed for real unique bodies.
No.
Which we all are, to be honest. We're all unique and we're all different. Everybody is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's flip the belief then. If it's not our sewing, what's the actual problem? What's the solution? Because here's the truth most people never realize. The principles they've been taught may seem fine until you hit a unique shape. And that's the blind spot that nobody connects.
Exactly. And this is the key almost nobody sees. People think they need a special hack for every unique body shape, whether it's a plus size alteration or for a long torso or any kind of adjustment. But the real reason those principles collapse is because they start from the wrong place. They start from a template. That's the standard size.
Basic, yeah.
Yeah. And this is why we start making clothes in the first place, is we want something that fits properly without having to do alterations.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense if you have to buy something and do alterations, why make a pattern and then make the garment and then have to do alterations?
Yeah.
Surely you should get all that fixed before you even cut the pattern.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's the shift. The moment you start drafting from the body, instead of trying to adjust a template, fit no longer becomes something you try to chase. It's something you control. And this is the connection a lot of people miss, because pattern making is how you solve unique body shapes, because the block begins with the body, not the other way around. And when people see that, the light bulb goes on and going, it was never me that was a problem. It's not their sewing that's the problem.
Yeah.
It was the system that they were trying to work with. And when that light bulb goes on, it's such an amazing feeling to have. Like, for example, I had a student who had scoliosis, and not like quite extreme, but she
Yeah.
could never, she wanted to buy a fitted garment. She had a family function. And so she wanted to use the space at the college, going, right, well, I can just use we obviously had a big sewing room and
Yeah.
things. You can do that on your lunch
Yeah.
break. And she was so upset because obviously being a fashion student, she thought this could be really easy for her because as a student, she was like, I'll just buy a commercial pattern. I'll work it from there. But obviously
Oh, it
doesn't
didn't
have
work.
that
Yeah.
in there for, and I, luckily I was there and I said, well, what we need to do is take extra measurements. So if you have a client that obviously has scoliosis, sometimes I like to do extra measurements with some might have one leg longer than the other or a hips higher than the other. And once we went through the measurements, because she already knew pattern cutting, she knew how to adapt the pattern. It's just the knowledge of how to
Yeah.
do it properly.
Yeah.
And she was so overwhelmed because she was able to make something that actually fit her. And it was the first time that she was able to have a fitted dress that wasn't wonky because obviously the hips were in the right place, the waist was in the right place for her. So she went actually on to make bespoke garments for people after she graduated because she realised actually the commercial patterns or standard patterns are not for everybody. And she was, not only she's become successful, she absolutely loves what she does.
Yeah, which is far more important than any of that.
Exactly.
And there's so many people out there that will relate to that as well.
Exactly. Because it's not only like scoliosis, it could be,
Anything.
a lot of women might have one breast bigger than the other, or we have uneven
Yeah.
shoulders. And, so instead of, stop adjusting what you have, go with the basics, and then you can actually
Build up. Yeah.
Yeah. And once you know that, then you can go and adjust any pattern because you have that knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So basically, we don't need 100 hacks for every single body shape. Otherwise, you'd be going forever. We just need one system. It's like learning the alphabet. Once you know it, you can write any word.
Yeah.
And once you know this system, you can fit any body.
Yeah.
And that's a connection that most people never really make, but it's the one that changes everything.
Yeah. And I love that analogy about the alphabet because pattern making is pretty much the same thing. So, we have numbers, which are all the measurements that we put together to make a garment.
Yeah.
And the alphabet is letters we put together to make a language. So it's pretty
Absolutely. I love that.
So you need one true system that frees you from size limitations. And that's what pattern making is. The block starts with the body, not the other way around. So you look at the body, you take the measurements, you create the block for that body. You do all the alterations for that unique body before you even create the pattern, before you even cut the fabric. Everything's there for the body. So that's why pattern making works for everybody, no matter what the shape is, whether you're plus size, petite, got a large hip to waist ratio. Once you know those principles and adapt it, you will then know how to not only cut your own blocks and patterns from scratch, you will have the confidence to adapt commercial patterns correctly to fit perfectly every time.
That's so true. So true.
Yeah.
So why do dressmakers always hit a wall when it comes to unique body shapes? Plus size, petite, asymmetry, extreme proportions. Is it really about chasing a new hack every single time? Or is there one secret that just works across them all?
So the secret is, and should be the extension of your hand, and that is your tape measure. Always take measurements, and the more the better. So like I said, on commercial patterns, your measurement list is about this big, you want it about this big. And especially when I work with either a plus size client or especially unique body shapes, is I'll take extra measurements. So that will be especially on the waist, because some people might put more weight on the waist, on their front, on their belly, or some people might put it on their love handles or anywhere else. So take that extra measurement. Take a front waist, take a back waist. Especially on the bust, take the whole bust measurement. And then what I'll do is sometimes I'll just take the back bust measurement, which is just where the bra strap is from the side seam to the side seam. Because some people might be quite petite, but then have a large bust.
Yeah.
And especially on hips, some people might put more of the weight on their buttocks, some people might put more on the side hip, because obviously that will change the shape of where you put darts. Because sometimes you might put too much shaping on that area where they need more shaping on this
Right.
area here. So the more measurements you take, the more precise it's going to be. And then you can have things like, you might have people with extreme proportions. So there'll be, they can have a really tiny waist and quite large hips. And sometimes, I get students send me patterns where, you don't want that outer edge looking on your pattern looking like this. So you will need darts. And sometimes just put in the extra dart.
Yeah.
So you'll need more darts, because sometimes they might go further, they might have that little back that goes in there, or it might be smaller on the waist.
Right.
So you'll know where to put the darts in. So you've got the basis of wedge put darts, but you go, actually, I need to put extra darts in here, because you don't want a side seam looking like this. You still want that side seam to be smooth so it sits nicely into the body. But then the shaping where the darts are is going to put the shaping where the shaping is on the body,
Right.
rather on the side seam. So if you do it on the side seam, it all sticks out like that. Put the shaping where the shaping is. So always take extra measurements, always.
So basically, the more measurements you take, the easier your job will ultimately become.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you have a favorite student story where someone was ready to give up because their unique body shape seemed impossible, and then they suddenly realized, wait a second, it's actually not me, it's just the system?
Yeah.
The moment where the connection finally click,
Yeah.
and they see pattern making really does work for everybody.
Yeah. That was actually me.
That's a great example.
So yeah, because it was my first plus size client, and I don't even think I was at university then. It might have been before I was doing university. So, and then, obviously got a commercial pattern, and, it didn't work because, my client was about my height. I'm under 5'2", but she was a size, was it size 18 or a size 20?
Uh-huh.
So when you look at patterns, the grading, how it works on a commercial pattern, they think that if you grow this way, then you're obviously going to be tall with wide shoulders.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't quite work like that. People carry weight in different areas of their body.
Yeah, of
So it's not
course.
standardized either. So it's only when, I was taught by my grandma as well. She wasn't around.
Oh.
She wasn't around then.
Yeah.
But it's then when I started to go, okay, we need to start looking at the body and looking at the measurements as well. And that's when I came up with okay, let's take front and back measurements. Take all the measurements rather than this little chart, which was about four
tiny.
measurements.
Yeah.
Knowing where the bust point is, knowing where the armhole depth is, because, according to this pattern, the armhole depth would be down here.
Right.
Well, no one puts on weight on their underarm.
Yeah, of course.
The underarm stays there. You don't actually put on, no fat sits in your actual underarm. It might be round it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't actually sit there. So you don't necessarily need a dropped armhole for it.
Yeah.
So I would took it all the way back to make it fit where it needed to fit, and have the plus size where I needed it, but to be able to fit in the most important areas. So that's the armhole depth across the shoulders, around the neck, and the bust and the waist and the hips be sitting exactly where they are. And to make sure, if they have more prominent belly, take the darts and the shaping away from that, and I can add it more into the back. And it fits and complements the body so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the logic behind the Sew Ready Foundation and the way we teach fit at GlowHigh. Not as a course, but as a way of thinking. Once someone sees this connection, they reach a crossroads. They either keep struggling inside broken templates, or they finally decide to learn the foundation properly. Because once you see that pattern making works for everybody, you can't go back to blaming yourself or chasing hacks. Click in the link in the description to get your free mini trial lesson straight from the masterclass and start taking control today. Nancy, so let's get tactical. What are the 2 things someone listening can do right now to break out of that alteration nightmare and start seeing that pattern making actually does work for everybody?
Again, measurements. I might say it to them. I will say it all the time. Measurements, measurements, measurements.
Mm-hmm.
Take as many measurements as you can. Take the neck measurement, where the bust point is, where the armhole is, where the bust is sitting, where the waist is sitting. Don't just guess. Never guess where it is. If you need to ask the client to come back, take more measurements. Don't just go, oh, but if that's that's a standard.
Don't assume.
Don't assume.
Yeah.
Because when you can do that when you're doing fashion line and you do your standard measurements, but when you're doing bespoke and you're making for a unique body especially, you need to take as many measurements as possible. Once you have that information, then it's going to be much easier. Those alteration nightmares, they'll become a fraction.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be even stop altogether, but you need to know how to use those measurements.
Yeah.
So we'll show you how to use it. But yeah, knowing where the length measurements, so armhole depth, the nape to waist, waist to hip, waist to all of these, especially where the shaping is, if you don't know where they are on the body, where you put those shaping in, it's going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So say your bust is in the wrong place, that's why you're going to get pulling up here and bagging down here because the bust point's in the wrong place.
Right.
Exactly.
So Nancy, do you have any other advice for our listeners today?
So I'd say stop blaming yourself and start questioning the pattern, because obviously the pattern is wrong. So you're not the one to blame, the system is to blame. So start questioning what is wrong with that pattern and where to fix it. And then the other thing I would say is to start looking at bodies. So I mean, it started when I was at university, and I started to get, I mean, I live in London, so I'd get on the train and I would just be focused looking at people. London is a great place to do people watching as well. But I became obsessed with looking at different bodies, like different proportions, different postures. You know, you might have people of the same size walking past, but some might be more hunched over. Some might be quite high up in the shoulders. Some might be quite sloped in the shoulders.
Right.
So when someone comes into your studio, you can see this immediately. So I get a lot of students ask me like, well, when do I know that I need to make an alteration for a sloped shoulder or a high shoulder?
Yeah.
You see this automatically, because they look like they're shrugging, or they look, you start to notice it.
Yeah.
So you want to make clothes for people, that's your canvas. You know, artists will always look at their inspiration. You know, we're going to be artists. Look at your inspiration. Start looking at bodies.
So
Yeah.
true. If someone is listening at home and thinking, okay, this sounds amazing, but I'm so scared that I'll mess it up, what's the first tiny win that they could aim for?
Well, the first thing I would actually say is don't be scared of failure, especially when you're at the beginning. You only get to be successful by failure. Failure is the route to success.
And like, what about like a small project?
So I would say to probably start with a skirt block,
Okay.
because it's really simple. It doesn't, you can do something quite small. Don't do anything dramatic. Do a basic skirt. Won't use up loads of fabric. You don't have sleeves or armholes or anything scary to deal with. But you could do that waist to hip proportion. And it's a really good way to do that, because once you master that, then you can see how you can expand the skirt. But don't be scared of the failure. Just keep with it, because you'll realize, and then you'll start to have fun with it. Because when you go in and have that mental attitude of, I can't do this, it becomes not fun.
Yeah.
If you come in and go, this is a fun project, if I mess it up, I'm going to learn from something from it, it
Yeah.
becomes fun.
Yeah. And I think it starts to spiral from there as well. Like,
Exactly.
and you just kind of get in your head and it just becomes unenjoyable and you think you're rubbish and
Yeah.
it just gets worse. And it's all an experience and
Exactly.
yeah, you'll
So,
get there.
yeah.
So Nancy, right there sounds like a heart of your whole system, to be honest, like starting with the real body instead of a mannequin, starting with a real example. Why is that shift so powerful? And why do you say it's the foundation that frees sewists from endless alterations?
It's because the block begins with the body, not the other way around. So that one shift just flips the whole game. Commercial patterns, like I said, they were a great starting point, but they're made for mass production. They're not made for unique bodies. And they're made for you to fit into that pattern. They're, not starting with the body. So it's the difference between guessing and knowing. With commercial patterns, you're guessing where the ease is, you're guessing where the bust point is, you're guessing all these things that, if you take the right measurements and you do a block, everything's already there for you. So you stop with the guessing, you have all the knowing, you have everything there to stop you making the mistakes and having this endless alteration nightmare.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And once someone really, really gets this, once they see that block begins with the body, what does that unlock for them long term? Is it just about fixing one dress or does it change their entire approach to design?
So, no, it's not about fixing one dress. It's about fixing the whole system for them. So whether that means you can have any client, so you can have plus size, petite, tall, short, anyone walking through the door. So you can become really successful in having a big clientele with return clients. That's when you know you're really successful, when the clients keep coming back because they know that you make fit work. Or the other thing is you can create this into your own line where, again, people buy into obviously things that look nice, but comfort and fit is going to be really important there. That's what makes them to come back to you each time. So basically, the sky's the limit. Once you know how to fit clothes properly, how to cut patterns properly, how to cut blocks properly, the sky's the limit for you, because you can become a success, whether you want to make bespoke, whether you want to go into theatre, whether you want to go and do your own line, when you want to go into film, whatever you want to do. But you will have that freedom to make perfect fitting clothing without having this endless nightmare, and you get to enjoy it as well. That's when you really start to enjoy the projects. You get to enjoy your job. It won't feel like a job anymore because you love what you do.
Yeah.
And that's what I am every day.
Truly creative freedom. See, that is why you are the queen.
I don't know about that.
Own it. Yeah, you should. That right there is the shift from chasing fixes to finally owning the foundation.
Exactly.
If this episode gave you a few aha moments, you're going to love what's next. If you're tired of chasing fit issues and constantly adjusting your patterns, click in the link in the description to get your free mini trial lesson straight from the masterclass and start taking control today. Okay, before we wrap, I'm going to ask you 7 fun questions that I'm meant to be saying here. Answer in 1 sentence and don't think too much.
Okay.
Tools, friend or enemy?
Friend.
Coffee or tea while sewing?
Neither in the workroom. They can stain the fabric.
Biggest sewing disaster you laugh about now?
Rip seam on the runway.
1 sewing tool you can't live without?
Tape measure.
If you could go back in time, what would you master first?
What, pattern cutting or sewing? Always pattern cutting.
If you had to describe sewing in 1 word, what would it be?
I find it relaxing. I never used to be, but yeah, it's relaxing for me.
After all of this time, it's now fun.
Yeah.
Nancy, 1 last fun one. If you could design the perfectly fitting garment for any woman in history, who would it be? And please don't say me. My ego can't take it today.
Oh, I was going to say that.
Damn, I knew you were.
Yeah. I would say Marilyn Monroe, but I'd make her a suit.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Yes, I love that. And that is today's GlowHigh session. Remember, it's not your sewing, it's the system. Because once you master the foundation, you'll never see the fit the same way again. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.
If you're tired of wasting fabric, fighting fit issues, and wondering why nothing ever fits the way it should, watch Nancy Tauber's free mini lesson from the Sew Ready Pattern Making Masterclass and discover why the problem was never your sewing. It was the system. Click the link below this video to watch now.